All right, y'all, welcome to the show. Forgive me, but my brain is not functioning today, it feels like. But nonetheless, we will try to do a show. And I will try to say things that are logical and reasonable and make sense, even though I feel like a total moron right now and I have 3 brain cells left. All right, so a lot to talk about. New Hampshire primary just happened. We're going to break down the Democratic side. We're going to break down the Republican side. There's a lot to say in every which direction. Right up front, I'll tell you, this thing is www.over.net. It's a Rappington across the board. Republican side, Democratic side. I mean, it pains me to say it. I don't want it to be the case, but it's true. So we'll talk about that. We'll also talk about Israel and Gaza in a little bit. Of course, we have updates there. I have some voters on the ground in New Hampshire. These like on-the-street interviews where they savage Trump and Biden. Those are fun. So we'll jump into all that. Everybody do me a big favor. Please subscribe to the channel. It helps out massively. Costs you absolutely nothing. We're trying to get to 2 million subsies, and it's deeply appreciated. And by the way, thank you to everybody who supports this show on Patreon or tips on YouTube or supports Crystal, Kyle, and friends. You guys mean the world to me. Couldn't do it without you. And remember, I've never had a conversation with an advertiser. I'm very, very proud of that fact. You guys make it possible. Without you guys, that would not be possible. All right, so let's go ahead and dive into it here. So first, let's do the Republican side. I predicted the other day Donald Trump would get 55% and Nikki Haley would get 45%. I absolutely nailed it. So Trump is at 54.4% and Nikki Haley is at 43.3%. That's with 95% of the voting in. So the results are interesting. There's a lot to say. By the way, shout out to the people who still decided to vote for DeSantis, Chris Christie, Ramaswamy, and Mike Pence, even though they're all out of the race. I find those people very adorable. But there's a lot to say about these results. So Nikki Haley did massively outperform her poll numbers. She was at like 30 or 35%, and she ended up with almost 45%. That's a massive outperformance. But at the same time, it doesn't really matter. You still lost by double digits, and we don't have participation trophies in politics, and so it is what it is. You sort of got draxed. This race is over. Like, okay, if Nikki Haley couldn't win New Hampshire, a state which was one of her best chances because of the demographics, because of the income level, because of the number of unaffiliated voters, etc. If she can't win New Hampshire, she can't win anywhere. So next she goes to South Carolina. Look, I'll tell you right now, she will lose South Carolina by a much bigger margin than she lost here in New Hampshire. Now, it's her state. She doesn't seem to think that. She seems to think she could pull off a miracle comeback. She'll see that's not going to happen. So then the question arises. She didn't drop out last night, even though it's already basically over. She seems to think she could win in South Carolina. She can't. So it's like, what are you doing? Well, either she will drop out after South Carolina and endorse Trump, which is very, very possible, if not likely, or she'll just hang around and stay in the race for the simple fact that this guy's got 91 criminal charges. He could be found guilty at any minute. He could be behind bars, so you can be the fallback option. Or the Supreme Court is going to hear those cases from Maine and Colorado about this guy actually needs to get kicked off the ballot because he violated the Constitution. He's disqualified because of the attempted insurrection. So there's multiple paths where Trump is basically taken off the field. She may stay in just in case he's gone, and then she's just like the default option. I tend to think no, though. Since DeSantis got out and he wasn't trying to be the fallback option, I tend to think Nikki Haley, after South Carolina, will probably step out, will probably endorse Trump. But yeah, man, that's it. So there's a huge takeaway here, which is really fascinating, which is Trump really has a total lock on the Republican base. Nobody can deny that. There is a cultish following for Trump, and they are all in. However, he does actually have some massive weaknesses which don't bode well for him in a general election. Now, Biden also has weaknesses in a general election, and we've talked about them ad nauseum, but we don't talk enough about Trump's massive general election weakness. We've never seen a gap between the independent vote and the Republican vote in a New Hampshire primary like we saw last night. Trump won Republicans by 49. Haley took independents by 22, a swing of 71 points. The previous high was 40. So again, in other words, he's doing so well among the Republican base, so well among people without college degrees, for example, but among highly educated people and among independents and unaffiliated and moderately conservative folks, he got obliterated. So again, that doesn't bode well for a general election. Now, as the results were rolling in, Nikki Haley went out and gave a speech. She made very clear she is staying in. She basically attacked Trump for being a massive electoral liability since 2016, which is definitely true. She went after him for his age. She was actually being more aggressive than I've seen her be in quite a while against Trump. And then Trump comes out and gives a speech after hers. And this is actually really funny because of the line he takes to attack her. Watch this.
And today, I have to tell you, it was very interesting because I said, wow, what a great victory. But then somebody ran up to the stage all dressed up nicely when it was at 7. But now I just walked up and it's at 14. But she ran up when it was 7. And, you know, we have to do what's good for our party. And she was up and I said, wow, she's doing like a speech like she won. She didn't win, she lost. And, you know, last week we had a little bit of a problem. And if you remember, Ron was very upset because she ran up and she pretended she won Iowa. And I looked around, I said, didn't she come in third? Yeah, she came in third.
Look, it's true and it's funny, but also Trump lives in the glassiest glass house of all time because saying he won when he didn't is sort of his thing. He is literally still doing that about 2020. But of course, in his mind, when I do it, it's okay. When she does it, it's stupid and wrong and dumb and bad. And he doesn't even realize hypocrisy. I don't think he has whatever the thing is in your brain that allows you to acknowledge hypocrisy. He doesn't have it. It's just whenever I do anything, it's good by definition. Whenever anybody else does the same thing, it's terrible and wrong and evil. Here's some more findings from the exit polls. So as I told you guys going into this primary, it is a very, very different state from Iowa. Iowa, very white evangelical Christian, very conservative. The numbers reflected that. In New Hampshire, definitely different. So here we see, do you think Biden legitimately won the 2020 election? They asked this of the Republicans who voted. 49% said yes, he won. 49% said no, he didn't. That's a way better number than what we saw in Iowa, where it was a vast majority that said no, Trump won the election. Are you part of the MAGA movement? Only 32% said yes. Only 32%. That number was way higher in Iowa. Other findings that were interesting, it was 49% registered Republicans who voted in this primary. 47% were registered undeclared. So they're unaffiliated, independents, moderate voters. And you did have a small number of Democrats that actually decided to unregister as a Democrat, be unaffiliated, and then basically go vote for Nikki Haley to put a middle finger up to Trump. That is true. That did happen. But the Trump people are definitely going to understate just how weak they are with independents in general. Because two things are true at the same time. Number one, he really has that Republican base on lock. But number two, he's very, very weak with independents. So it's over. He's winning the primary, but then, to address the weaknesses in the general, I don't know if they have that in him. Again, Biden has his own problems, similar issues where he's a weak general election candidate. But I'll say this in all confidence, Trump is the only candidate on the Republican side that will make it so there's a possibility that Biden could win. Really, really wild stuff. Okay, so now let's get to the Democratic side. A lot of interesting stuff here. So my prediction on the Democratic side was Biden would get a little under 50%, maybe about 48%, and you'd have Dean Phillips outperform his polling average. His polling average was 10, and Marianne Williamson would outperform her polling average. Her polling average was 5. What did we see? With 95% reporting, Joe Biden had to be on the ballot as a write-in candidate. So he was actually not on the ballot. And that's because the DNC put their middle finger up to New Hampshire and said, we're moving you out of the first place. We want South Carolina to go first because South Carolina, they say for diversity, that's why we want them to go first. No, it's because he won South Carolina last time and they want to rig it up front for Biden. So there's a big dispute. The DNC says this doesn't even count. But they had Joe Biden as a write-in candidate. They did a write-in campaign. So Joe Biden as a write-in candidate got 53.4%. Now, again, I thought it'd be about 48%. He outperformed that, okay? That is a really, really strong number, especially just as a write-in candidate, and especially since the Biden campaign put their middle finger up to New Hampshire. So that's kind of astonishing. Now, I was right about Dean. I said he'd outperform his polling average of 10. He got 19.6%. And Marianne pretty much hit her polling average. She was averaging 5. She got 4.6%. More on Marianne in a minute. And then unprocessed write-in. See, this is interesting to me. There was a massive campaign for people to write in ceasefire as a protest to say to Biden, you better do a permanent ceasefire in Gaza. There's a massive write-in campaign. You also had Cenk Uygur, who was a write-in candidate. They have all sorts of people listed here who got some votes. Vermin Supreme, Paperboy Prince. There's a lot of people here that you could see that got some votes. 207 over here, 103 over here, 689 over here. They literally don't list ceasefire, even though they know the number that voted for ceasefire, and it's a decent chunk, and they don't list Cenk Uygur's number because, of course, he's going through the court cases. He's a naturalized citizen, not a natural-born citizen, so they're determining from a constitutional perspective if he's allowed to run, but they're not even showing the votes Cenk got. They're not even showing it. And they're not even showing the number of votes ceasefire got. And by the way, I'm willing to go out on a limb here. Ceasefire definitely got thousands of votes. I think Cenk probably got a little over 1,000 too, but ceasefire definitely got thousands of votes. Like I said, Biden's at 53.4%. There's 13,888 unprocessed write-ins, but a large chunk of them, they say they're just unprocessed. No, a large chunk of them are ceasefire and Cenk, and they don't want to show those, which just shows you how much they have this thing locked down, man. There's so many sly little Weasley tricks that are done that are just grotesque and taint the process. Like, for example, I was watching CNN yesterday, all the coverage, and I think they may have had a policy. Don't say Dean Phillips' name, don't say Marianne Williamson's name, don't say Cenk Uger's name. They went out of their way to say, when Biden won and they called it, oh, Biden had, quote, challengers. Why won't you say their names? It's almost like there's a literal policy that they try not to say their names. So, and that gets to, the roadblocks that were put up early on. By the way, here's another example of the sly Weasley little tricks that happen, which just sort of undermine the candidates that they don't view as legitimate. The first place that votes in New Hampshire is Dixville Notch. Hilarious name, I know. Only 6 people vote in it, but they vote at like 12 at night, like the day of the election. So the first ones. Haley got 6 votes, Trump got 0. But look on the Democratic side, they don't have Biden written down because he basically took his name off the ballot. But they have Dean Phillips written there. They don't even have Marianne written there. She's been on the ballot literally longer than anybody. Why would you not put her name on the ballot? Marianne got in this race very early. And she was basically the first one to say, look, Biden, thank you for beating Trump in 2020, but you're done. We got to go further than what you're willing to do. We don't think you can beat Trump. We think that you're one of the only candidates that could lose to Trump. And so we need a bold agenda. We have to go in a further left direction. We need a new economic bill of rights, for example. That's something she ran on. And she got in early and she worked so hard. Guys, she went all over New Hampshire nonstop, relentlessly, trying everything she could to get her message out, to get votes. And she basically ran into a brick wall. And the brick wall was not being treated as a serious candidate. The brick wall was media indifference, right? Now, she also literally had the DNC meddling around behind the scenes where she would have a speech to give to college Democrats in this state or that state, and she'd get a phone call like, actually, you're not doing that speech. Like, the head of the college Democrats would call and say, sorry, we can't have you. They won't, let us have you, which is like, what? They would pay for the voting data in various states, and then they would just get stymied, and they wouldn't receive the voting data that they literally just paid for. Right? There were so many ways that the thumb was on the scale behind the scenes. And when you mix that, literally a literal institutional attempt to push you off to the side, and you mix that, again, with the wall of indifference of the media, it was just impossible to break through. My inevitable conclusion, my inescapable conclusion here is, at this point, man, politics is all national. There was this old saying back in the day for politics that it's all local. Now it's the exact opposite. Politics is all national. And that brings us to where we are right now, right? Where Biden is definitely going to be the Democratic nominee. No ifs, ands, or buts about it. Trump is definitely going to be the Republican nominee. No ifs, ands, or buts about it. And this is something where at the macro level, you poll people, they don't want this. People don't want this. But at the same time, people are voting for them to be the ones to represent the parties. Why is that? It's the era of negative polarization. So everything is national, everything's about the show, everything's about the big names, and it's more about, I hate this motherfucker, so I'm voting for this motherfucker. I hate this motherfucker, so I'm voting for this motherfucker, right? People who are voting for Biden are just terrified of Trump, they hate Trump, and they think, I don't know, maybe he's the only guy that can beat him. People who are voting for Trump hate Joe Biden and want to trigger the libs, and so they're like, that's why Trump's my guy. He pisses off the people that I hate. So everything is negative polarization. Everything is national, top down. Nothing is local. If politics was local, Marianne would have done way better in the election, and so would Dean Phillips would have too. These are people who invested everything in New Hampshire, threw everything they had at it, had a million, zillion, trillion events, went and shook hands, went and knocked on doors, all of that stuff. And at the end of the day, it didn't matter. So the point I'm at now with lefty candidates, I sincerely believe the only chance for a lefty candidate to win something like a presidential election You either have to already have a name which is undeniable, like a senator, for example. When Bernie Sanders ran, you can't just pretend a senator doesn't exist. The media hated him, but at least there was some feeling. There was just indifference towards Marianne Williamson. They just pretended like she didn't exist. So you need to be like a senator or something. And if not a senator, you need to be like an A-list celebrity where the cameras can't help but follow you around. Because even if you're a congressman, as we saw with Dean Phillips, they should be like, no, you're an unserious congressman. So we're giving you no attention, right? So, you can't run from a local position or a state position. You can't run from being a congressman. You probably can't even run from being a C-list celebrity. Maybe a B would get across the line. I'm not sure. But like, if you're not undeniable, either a senator or some massive celebrity, then I don't know how a lefty candidate breaks through, because they pull out all of these tricks which are phenomenally successful. Now, by the way, I'm not saying, even if everything was fair and there was no fuckery and there was no media indifference, etc., do I think Marianne would have won or Dean Phillips would have won? No, probably not, right? But it certainly would have been a lot closer than what it was. There is no denying that. And Marianne was willing to go on every single show that would have her, to get her message as far and wide as possible. They would not have her. They would not have her because they unilaterally decided, with help from the DNC and the Democratic establishment, you are unserious. So we're going to treat you as unserious. We're going to treat you like you don't exist. And people can't vote for you if they don't even know you're in the frickin' race. And so I want to give a massive, massive thank you, first and foremost, to Marianne Williamson for being the person to step up early on and say, I'll do the hard work. I'll be the one to put myself out there. I'll be the one to go through the ringer. I'll be the one to, dedicate my life to this, only to come up short because it's such a hostile environment, and the left is also still licking its wounds from the failure of Bernie 2016 and 2020, that it didn't amount to much. So my heart goes out to her. I think she did a phenomenal job. She did the best with what she could work with, which was not much. But now, at the end of the day, it's so over. It is Trump. It is Biden. The only way it is not Trump versus Biden is if one of these dudes dies or goes to prison or gets kicked off the ballot. It's possible you get a scenario where they both die, and then it's like Kristi Noem or whoever Trump picks as his VP versus Kamala Harris. And it's all a nightmare scenario. So again, in conclusion, final point here. Politics is all national, and it's all about negative polarization. Everybody's voting based on who they hate. I hate that guy, so now I'll go for whatever the big name in my party is. Who cares that he's 1,000 years old? We'll go with him, right? Like, this is what it is. This is what it is. Everybody voting for Trump, who loves Trump, just hates liberals, wants to trigger the liberals, right? They love the show. Everybody's voting for Biden, or just hates Trump. Everybody votes for Trump, hates Biden. Like, you get what I'm saying. It's the era of negative polarization. It's the era of politics is national. It's not local. It's just not. If it was local, Marianne and Dean would have done way better. But this is where we are, man. This is where we are. So we'll see what happens from here. We'll see how long Nikki Haley stays in. But it appears like we're going towards this rematch, which, look, the polling shows most people don't want it. They don't want it. But at the same time, the ones who are casting the fucking votes apparently do want it. And I could talk for another hour and a half about why that is and how we got here. But that's all I'll say on it right now. Hey, y'all, do me a favor and like and subscribe. It helps out big time in the algorithm. Click the bell as well for notifications when videos drop. And watch that video on screen right now. You know you want to.